been reading books about magic of the serious kind, not the rabbit kind of magic, since I was a little boy.
The whole reason I got into film, I've told this story a million times, but I was working on a painting of a garden at night, and the plants in the dark night painting began to move, and I heard a wind. And I thought, this is interesting.
Welcome to Ritual Light and Sound, a podcast about occultism and esoterica in film. In this episode, we are discussing Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House. What's up with all this talk about non-Euclidean geometry? Can shapes and angles really direct energies, affect realities? The answer to this is yes. What is sacred geometry, and can it really be both a gateway and a barrier to things beyond our world? Let's get into all this, but first, let's bring on a guest to talk about the film. I am here with my homie Edwin Callahan of Gravely Unusual magazine and super secret black metal projects in the Appalachian area and other things. Edwin is here to talk to me about the Stuart Gordon film Dreams in the Witch House today. But before I just keep talking about this movie, Edwin, say hello to the peoples.
What's up, guys? I'm really pumped to be here. It's one of my favorite Gordon joints, so I'm really pumped, man.
Right, yes, a Stuart Gordon joint. I like to kick it off with this, and boy am I rusty, listeners, because I haven't recorded one of these in forever, because I'm probably just gonna go all out and include the earlier portion of our chat where I'm just like laying out why I haven't done one of these things in a while, because part of my philosophy behind just fucking doing this thing today is like, I gotta stop trying to like wait for the perfect day, or to feel like it matters or something. I gotta just fucking talk about this movie because that's what we do here. So here we are to talk about movies and kooky shit, y'all. But there is a revolution outside, Americans, and fuck them police, Black Lives Matter, all of that sort of thing. Edwin feels the same, by the way. Don't take his silence as like complacency.
No, not at all, dude. Fuck the police, Black Lives Matter, 100%.
So, Dreams in the Witch House, Stuart Gordon. This is I think it technically counts as a feature film because I think all you have to hit is 50 minutes to be a feature. I think.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I know I watched it on Masters of Horror back in the day, and that's probably one of my first introductions to Lovecraft, actually. Like, to be honest, maybe.
Oh, cool, man. Fucking a great one, because I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like for me, this is the most spot on Lovecraft adaptation
Agreed.
outside of the silent film, The Call of Cthulhu. That one is to me 100% the most truest and best Lovecraft film adaptation.
I've never seen it.
Ooh wee, dude, I have it downloaded on my Plex.
I watch Plex all the time.
Shit. Okay, well, I'll add you to my Plex after this, man, and you should go and watch it on my list as soon as you can. It's fucking incredible, dude. It's so good.
I will.
But yeah, so I mentioned running time just to make note of the fact that this is not technically a film as such. I mean, this thing was not released standalone or theatrically or anything like that. It was indeed an episode of Showtime's Masters of Horror. So that's what we're here to talk about. Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House from Showtime's Masters of Horror, which was what, like mid to late 2000s?
Yeah, it was like 2005, I'm thinking. 2004,
Okay,
2005, 2006, something like that.
Right on. That's further back than I thought. And Dreams in the Witch House was from season 1. Season 1 was definitely the strongest fucking season of that show.
Yeah, for sure.
It had Dreams in the Witch House and Cigarette Burns by Carpenter.
Yeah, Cigarette Burns, dude. That was like, God, that was such another great one, man.
Yeah, we might have to get back together and talk about that one.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, too.
Because, yeah, there's There's a lot of excuses to call that an occult movie, but yeah, so here we go. Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House there, Edwin. First of all, hit me with your overall impressions. I assume that you probably love the film.
Dude, I mean, I'm like ecstatic over this film. When you actually asked me to do it, I was like, oh shit, man, this is like my favorite, my favorite adaptation of Lovecraft. Gordon always comes with Lovecraft in his own, it's from his own perspective. It's definitely not like, I don't know if Lovecraft would be like, hey, this is what I wanted it to be. But at the same time, I think with Dreams in the Witch House, he would probably be like, not like rolling over in his grave or anything. He'd probably be like, "Oh, this is actually like pretty good." As far as like the movie, I think what I like about it most is that first of all, there is somewhat of love interest. I think they just had to do that commercially, but at the same time, it's not at all. It's just like I feel like Gordon just had to throw that in there. You know what I'm saying? To get it on TV, but
Yes, I'll circle back to this.
the way the familiar looked, uh
Woo!
Jenkins is just like,
Yeah.
oh, dude, it's just like that is it's so campy, but at the same time, that scared the shit out of me. I was like, what? I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen like in the way they shoot it. It's like you could obviously tell he's like a full grown person, but they shoot it in like he's like small. And there's a scene where he's like on his chest, and there's a scene in the fucking insane asylum, and
Oh
that's always a
yeah.
good Lovecraft trope, the insane. But yeah, man, and the purple light, the way the light is scary. I mean,
Oh
just
yeah.
I mean, everything about it, man. It's just dude, I don't really have any complaints about this movie at all.
Right on, man. So you mentioned the love interest, right? And you also mentioned what Lovecraft may or may not have thought about Stuart Gordon or this thing in particular if he had got a chance to see it. The deal with me and Stuart Gordon is that when I was younger, I hated Stuart Gordon movies.
Really?
Yeah, man, the only ones I saw Reanimator, and then I saw maybe 15 or 20 minutes of Castle Freak when I
Mm-hmm.
was 15, 16, something like that. And I only sought the movies out because I knew obviously that Reanimator was based on Herbert West's Reanimator, and then I read that this guy Gordon makes a ton of Lovecraftian movies, and that he had done The Outsider in the form of Castle Freak or whatever. So I watched
Mm-hmm.
Reanimator, and I was like, this is fucking goofy, like wannabe Return of the Living Dead slasher shit pretending to be Lovecraft, and it's so far from feeling like Lovecraft that,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
as a 15-year-old who was like looking for the H.P. Lovecraft movie, I was like, no, this is fucking just another like schlocky 80s thing pretending to be a Lovecraft story. And because of that, I couldn't get into just it like on its own thing, because I grew up on Friday the 13th and Freddy and all that goofy 80s shit, but I didn't want to fucking see that in no Lovecraft story.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I really, really didn't like Reanimator. And then I
There's not
gave
enough
Castle.
pessimism in it, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, no. And same thing with Castle Freak. I couldn't even watch that whole movie because I was like, man, what? This has jack shit to do with The Outsider. How dare they even
Yeah.
tell me on the internet that this is based on The Outsider? This is fucking stupid. And furthermore, what I didn't like about those two movies was, this is gonna sound totally fucking stupid because I'm like a big Joe Bob mutant guy. I was like, there's too much fucking nudity in these movies.
Yes, dude.
All these naked women and all these titties. This is not Lovecraft, dude.
Yeah,
Like, he would hate
to
this
be
shit.
Lovecraft. Yes, yes. I totally agree with you, man. Like I really do.
Yeah, and so, but what sold me eventually on Gordon was Dagon. I saw
God
Dagon.
damn, Dagon is awesome.
Yeah, when I was maybe 19 or 20, me and my older brother rented it. This was still back in the fucking video days. We got that bad boy on VHS, and I was like, holy shit. And it clicked for me. Like, I still didn't really like it, but I got a glimpse of Gordon's big picture. So the way that
Yeah.
Stuart Gordon gets Lovecraft movies made is with those titties.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like he's like,
Hmm.
I have freaking goddess Barbara Crampton on deck, and she will take off all she's got in this totally bizarre script based on a guy who's been dead 80 years and some really hard to sell concepts. Yeah, but no, that's how he sells those fucking scripts to money men.
Which I think what Crampton gets, she shows her boobs in almost all of them, right? Does she? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Well, I
which I
don't
know
not in Castle
in
Freak.
okay, not in Castle Freak, but then you don't need that in Castle Freak because you got fucking weird fingering scenes and a
Right.
fucking
Yes.
naked Castle Freak. Fucking yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Castle Freak is super sexual, which is very weird because. But here's the thing. I don't want to go off on Castle Freak. Here's the thing, though, is so like with Lovecraft, we know that's like sexuality is like super repressed with him. Like he was kind of like very put off by it. If anyone's like a
Absolutely.
I'm sure me and know. I mean, but listeners, like if you like look into Lovecraft's life, he wasn't very sexually driven. But I think maybe I don't know, maybe like that's something you don't see it in his stories. You know what I mean? At all. There's not really any sex. Is there at all? Any? I've never read one story with any
No.
kind of love interest or sexual interest at all.
No. Well, as far as I right off the top of my head anyway, and there ain't many Lovecraft stories, So for fans like us who have read them, you probably read them all, and
Yeah.
probably read them all a few times. But the thing on the doorstep is about a relationship. Like, dude marries up. He marries that rich
And that
woman.
was when he was with what's her name, and he moved to New York for a little while, correct? Like that was
Exactly.
during
And that was
that period,
obviously
yeah.
like his story about dealing with relationships. And what happens in that story? The weird woman that the guy marries turns out to be like a kooky, evil occult practitioner, and she steals the guy's body.
Which that's what happened to him. He was like forced to have sex with her.
Right. And yeah, so all of that seems to be like how he was dealing with things, because he kind of felt obligated to marry because he was the only son and heir.
Yeah.
So he married this, fairly well-to-do woman. I think she was, and that's not even important. But obviously, dude was pressured to do the American man thing and carry on the line, but he really didn't want to. And yeah, that probably all came out in The Thing in the Doorstep, which is a story about a man being manipulated by an evil occultist woman with dark powers, which probably is all you need to know about what Lovecraft thought about women, about how he felt about women. A lot of people go another route, which I don't put any stock in this, but a lot of people think that the reason all his creatures and gods and stuff are so like fleshy and tentacly and squamous, is because all of that can be looked at vaguely as being vaginal.
Yeah, like female anatomy almost.
Right, which grossed him out, so he sort of ascribes some of those attributes to his creatures and his otherworldly gods and his things that his characters can't understand and are afraid of.
I
But I
don't know
don't
if I
really,
don't see that really that
yeah,
much.
I
Um
don't either. That kind of like suggests that Lovecraft knew more about vag than he probably did. You know what I
I
mean?
feel like he's
like,
not very like when it comes to subtext that deep, that's not really his thing. I mean, he's pretty obvious with his subtext, you know what I'm saying? Like we know what he's afraid of when he
right.
says certain words, right?
Yeah, he's afraid of foreigners and women and the ocean.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
um, yeah. But so all of this, to say that, like I said, like that's why Gordon's movies always have the strong female presence, because I don't think he could have sold these scripts otherwise.
I mean, how hard is it been to get Lovecraft movies adapted, throughout film history? You don't really think about it like when Roger Corman did it with they had to sell him as Edgar Allan Poe's, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
he's not very marketable in terms of content. That's what's making him hard to adapt to the screen, which is why I applaud Gordon a lot is because it's it's not easy to adapt Lovecraft to the screen. I mean, think about it, dude. In Dreams in the Witch House, the short story, most of his stories don't have any fucking dialogue. There's no quotations. It's
No,
just
no.
a guy's perspective. It's one person's
Yeah,
perspective, and even Dreams of the Witch House is third person, past tense. You know what I'm saying? Like, and
right.
I mean, for Gordon to take a story like Dreams in the Witch House and make it so entertaining on the fucking screen and still making it marketable on a Showtime show, that's a badass directing. It really is.
Yeah, no, he he killed it, and I mean, and another kind of a goofy yet great example of how good he was at what he did was that your man snuck some tits even in Dreams in the Witch House.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like he's managed to do it in every fucking one of his Lovecraftian movies, even that one, which seems like impossible to sneak some boobies into, but your man got it done. And yeah, that always every time he does it, I'm always like, oh, here we go. Here's Gordon with the boobs again. But the movies are still good, you know. And yeah, and what sold me on that was Dagon because for me, Dagon is a fucking great, a wonderful adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth,
It
but
really
while
is.
also being real strangely sexy and sexual at the same time, which makes sense in a story about heredity. What's the word I'm looking for here? A story about
Heredit.
heritage.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, a story about heritage, and like familial horror. It only makes sense to bring the sex angle into it because I mean that's what Deep Ones do. Deep One's whole gag is make babies with humans. That's their whole fucking angle is to propagate their species. So what I was gonna ask was what stands out for you about this film, but I think you've mentioned a few things, so let's start with that. Like Brown Jenkin and his design stands out to you, right?
The idea of a familiar in general is really like, I don't know what it is to me. It like has this like mystique to me that you have these like animal followers that you can use to do your bidding. You know what I'm saying? Like you know, like to have like a humanoid rat thing to like go out and do your bidding at your command because you control it. Like that's super cool to me. And just the fact that it uses, this is one big part of this film that really hits me, and the whole story itself is that it uses science to explain supernatural. So it's not really supernatural. It's all explained through science. It's like all these Euclid angles there, if I'm not saying it right, but like the idea of a out of place angle is very creepy to me. You know what I mean? And the fact that it's
Yeah, man.
super strange and it's like it can make you feel a certain way. Like say if you look like at certain angles at like a house, it can scare you because it looks weird.
That's right.
It's
Yeah,
using
absolutely.
it's using form and a theory of forms in a way that's very, it's like primitive in its fear. So I think the way
Yeah.
Gordon can adapt that is just a feat in itself. Like when he looks in the apartment, when Gilman moves into the apartment for the first time, when you read the story, you're like, what the fuck does that angle look like? And then you see it and you're like, that's exactly what I think it would look like. It's like this
Yes,
out of place
yes,
spot.
yes.
um
Right.
the fact that the use of there's like a counterpart to Gilman, the fucking priest, not the priest downstairs, but the religious guy. What's his
Right.
name? I can't
Yeah.
remember his name.
No, it's killing me. It's a Spanish name, right?
Yeah,
He's a
yeah, yeah,
Spaniard. Um
yeah. Well, the when he like hits his head, it's basically
Oh
he's
yeah.
lost faith too in the end. He has lost faith too in the end, and he's tried so hard because he encountered her before and killed a child, and he thought him protecting himself through religious faith all this time would protect him, and then he realizes that once again the science of evil manifests over religious dogma. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's
Right.
a lot of subtext in this, and I think that's what's really cool about Gordon and how he uses subtext, which also is really cool. Is like every scene is set up like it's like a stage play because he's from organic theater or whatever, and his blocking and the way he sets up shots. I mean, they're very It's very theatrical. Like, I think that's what makes him campy almost to some people. It's because he's very theatrical. He uses, the ability of the set design and all that shit. It's like everything piles together to make a very play-like setting.
Right, yeah, for sure. And I think this movie in particular highlights that theatricality of his style big time because it's so restricted. This movie's, it's obviously a budget thing and it's really restricted. There's only a few locations, not a lot of camera movement. It's real simple and could have been pulled off on a stage.
It could have.
And then earlier, you mentioned the crazy lighting, the purple lighting, and that's all just stage lighting. That's 100% Gordon being like, you know what we need to convey this, shifting of dimensions and this portal space opening up. Light, give me some stage lights in here. I got this covered, and it works perfectly.
The movie's been so influential to me that I like wrote a few stories like
Mhm.
when I first started writing about using the purple light, the light, the weird use of light, and I try to like adapt that to my story. So it's like even transcended back to the page from a Gordon movie. You know what I mean? It's like very
That's
influential. You know
cool.
what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's really cool, yeah. And yeah, so you talked about like when you read the story, and he describes this strange angle in the corner of the rented room that Gilman's in. Same deal. Like what I could picture that very clearly, or no, I shouldn't say very clearly. I picture it vaguely in my head. You know what I mean? It's just like a weird corner space in a room, but I can't say that I like really, really mapped it out in my headspace. But then you nailed it. I mean, when you see it in Gordon's film, like that's it. You're like, oh shit, that is fucking weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a simple thing. And like you said, it works on a really base psychology, which is that right angles look proper and fine to us, and things that are not right angles look a little fucking skewed and strange. And I don't know 100% why that is. I mean, it might just be as simple as right angles look stable and strong and therefore safe, and things that are not at right angles don't look stable and strong and safe. They look dangerous.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't go up into a building that looked like it was like jutting out to the, you know, like a 70-degree angle at an obtuse triangle. You wouldn't go on that, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
even like you see a fucking roller coaster that goes straight up and goes straight down and has all these humps, and why mountains look sublime. They're all these weird angles, you know what I mean? Things that kind of just scare you.
Yeah, and I like that you said it's a primitive fear because I think that nails it. I think that's got to be something that's really old for us, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So Brown Jenkin, the lighting. Anything else stands out in particular for you that you want to hit on?
Uh, I mean, that's about it, and that it doesn't really have a happy ending, man. It's like I said, that's true Lovecraft crap. You don't have a
Oh
happy ending,
yeah,
you know. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's
Exactly.
Hollywood doesn't like that. Hollywood doesn't like loose ends.
Right. Yeah. That's why like everything about a Lovecraft story is such a hard sell to any pack of Hollywood dudes with money is because you got to be like, well, first off, there's no women in this story. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
dudes. It might even just be one guy. There's not even any dialogue. It's got a real kick you in the nuts downer ending. And so Hollywood Money Man is like, oh, nope, nope, and nope. I'm gonna pass on that script, bro.
And
Which
a
is
baby
why,
dies. A baby dies. That's even scarier too, you know.
right? Yeah, which is, man, that's not part of the story though, right?
Uh,
As in, that
yes.
wasn't in the short story. It is.
No, yeah, yeah. The baby thing is it. Well, there's no like girl with a baby, but there is a scene where, like I said, Gordon threw the girl in specifically for this presentation of a feature. You know what I mean? But in the story, there's just like hearsay of like people saying, "Oh yeah, we saw a," and I'm not going to use the term that Lovecraft uses in the story, but he says basically like a black figure with a girl and a man are running with like a baby, and it's like there's like a baby missing, and there's like a little like big rat-like creature following them in the night. That's like all it says about it. You know what I mean? And then there's the bones at the end, which they put that in the movie too. The bones, the children's bones.
But the stuff you're talking about, that's like back back when the Spaniard killed all the kids, right? Like no
Right,
babies
right,
don't
yeah.
get killed in Gilman's time.
No, 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 no. Yeah, yeah. That's all like hearsay
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Right. Okay. Yeah. 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 I was just making sure I got that right. Yeah. No. 100%. And that's interesting because he added that, and he still
yeah,
sold the
yeah,
script.
yeah,
But I do feel like Masters of Horror on Showtime was in a very like they didn't show up to fuck around. You know what I mean? The
yeah.
whole deal. I think Mick Garris went to Showtime and was like, "I can get this thing happening. We can get all these guys on board, but you can't tell them what to do. Like it's gonna have to be you get 55 minutes to do whatever the fuck you can do with this amount of money." Kind of thing, and that's what they all did, because that first season hits hard, dude. Fucking, have you seen all of it? Have you seen Jennifer by Dario?
I love Jennifer, dude. I listened to a
Oh,
podcast with Steven Weber on Mick Garris's podcast
Oh
talking about
shit!
making Jennifer with Argento and stuff, and that he tried to help write with Argento, but Argento was like sometimes like, nah, man, this is how we're doing this. Like, this is we're gonna do this script my way. Like, which Jennifer is one of the first ones I saw, and I wasn't even like I said, dude. I mean, I didn't really get into like deep into like my horror movie like stuff until I was like 19 and stuff, man. I was always kind of like a more just like on the cusp of it. And then, like I said, Masters of Horror, when I saw it when I was like 15, that's kind of one of the things that pushed me into diving into horror like a lot.
Cool, man. I mean, for fucking great introduction because that first season really delivered on the title.
And you get to see everybody that needs to be seen, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, here we go, sir. As a horror film, do you find Dreams in the Witch House effectively scary or frightening?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's
Right. I think we've already touched on that already, but yeah.
there's not a lot of, especially think about the time period. So Gordon sold Lovecraft movies in the 80s, you know what I mean, when he could use a lot of that body horror shit with Reanimator and From Beyond. And even what did Dagon come before Massive Horror? That was like 2001, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Dagon's
yeah,
first, yeah.
yeah. And Dagon, and that's like, horror wasn't really much of like a thing for like Lovecraft at the time. It was more like Hostel and Saw and shit like that was
Yeah.
getting popular. Like more Blumhouse was like kind of like finally like taking hold of stuff and making it more of the theatrical commercial sellers, But to make a Lovecraft movie in that time and to make it like the way it was, like you didn't see that shit. So obviously, like as a kid, think about it. You're like flipping through the channels on Showtime late at night because you shouldn't be up and you're trying to find some dirty movie or something. And Masters of Horror is on, and then you catch Dreams of the Witch House. Dude, I couldn't be able to go to sleep if I saw that. You know what I mean? Like as a
Right.
15-year-old, but and even now it's effective. Like I wouldn't show that to my kids. Like I tried. My kid got scared when I was watching it. Like he was like, "What is this?" I was like,
Right.
I was like, "This is Dreams in the Witch House." He's like, "No, no," and he'll say sometimes he's like, "Not the witch house, not the witch house." He thought it was scary. I mean, so that proves it right there.
It
It's
is,
effective.
yeah. Right on, man. And what about it is it? Can you pinpoint what about it really that is scary? Because I think
Yeah,
it sort of works on a couple of different levels, but
there's definitely levels of like just the use of practical effects, as in like you don't really see any monsters except for really, the familiar is the most monstrous thing. But even, is it, they don't say it in the movie. I don't think they say what god or it is that he's signing the book with. It's just the man in black or something like that.
right, the
But
the black man, yeah,
yeah,
which
which is
is
that's Nyarlathotep, right? If I'm not
right. Yep,
mistaken. Yeah,
yep, that's him.
and the cloak and the obsidian dagger. I mean, this is occult stuff that you haven't seen in probably 20 years of movies at the time. You know what I mean? Like that has been on a big television show. So I mean, yeah, I mean just the occult aspect, the witches, the child sacrifice, the sacred mathematics and the light, the everything about it, man, is just it's like it's nightmare fuel.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I I definitely I love, like you said, the way that the occult stuff is presented really fucking scary and dark. And a lot of times nowadays when people try that, it never quite gets there for me. You know, I don't like the design of the set isn't quite there. It looks too cheesy or polished or whatever, but weird little fucking loft or whatever where Keziah Mason the witch is hanging out in Dreams in the Witch House is scary as shit. Like, and there's a lot of subtle shit going on too because the design of the place looks great. It all looks like really scary witch tools that are laying around, but then like the light is coming from the wrong
Yeah.
angles
Yeah.
everywhere in every single shot, like lights coming from places where it shouldn't come from, and that's a Lovecraft thing big time, you know. And yeah, for me though, I think like especially the last couple of times that I've watched it, and maybe I want to say this probably hit me the first time I saw it, and the story didn't quite affect me in this way, but when you see Ezra Godden, who's a fucking phenomenal actor, I want to talk about him in a minute, but when you see Ezra Godden in the film Dreams in the Witch House, it really hit me in a way that the story had never got me. The real horror here is what's happening to Gilman and how the poor fucking dude has no control over the situation. Like there was no escape for him. You know what I mean? And I feel like the
Yeah.
movie nails that down better than the story does. The story kind of feels a little basic in terms of how he interacts with things, but the movie really hits you over the head with the idea that destiny had the dude from the minute. You know, like when he walked into that fucking house, he was done. He was gonna kill that fucking baby, you know, which is just terrible. Like, who the fuck wants to kill a baby? That's got to be one of the worst things you could be forced to do, you know. And the poor dude is forced into that monstrous act, and then forced to pay for it. Then he's just left to deal with authority after he's done it. And that to me is like the real fucking twist in the guts from that movie.
Yeah, regardless of his good intentions, man, like no, even if he tried to save the baby, even if he tried to do good, he was destined to do the wrong thing and pay for it from the jump, dude.
Yeah, yeah, and which is like what that's what buries the fucking coffin for the Spaniard, right? Because he tried, he failed personally, but he was like, well, maybe I can help this kid. And when it fails for the kid too, he's like, oh, what was I thinking? It was never, you know, this was always the way it was gonna be, and I'm just gonna go hang from a rope now. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's so fucking grim, which is all perfectly Lovecraftian. The folding in the face of unimaginable terror, something that's so far beyond you that all you can do, the best thing you can do, is just snuff your little life out, so you don't
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
deal. Yeah, and all of that is very scary, and all of that it's Lovecraftian without having to be about Cthulhu or any of the big cosmic stuff. Like Dreams in the Witch House is really intimate and down to earth in a way that a lot of his stories aren't. But it still has that undercurrent of things that are much bigger than you and are more
Yeah.
powerful than you, and how you have no agency in life. You know, you're nothing. You're just you're an ant clinging to this rock, hurtling through space.
I think that's where Gordon is good at kind of holding back of Lovecraft's kind of exuberance, man. I mean, Lovecraft wants to talk about, you know, these strange worlds that you travel to through different angles and these polyhedrons and bubbles and things that make you do wrong. And Gordon didn't have to show any of that stuff to be scary. Like, you know, like Lovecraft had to try to
Yeah,
be scary. Lovecraft used a very basic formula from a very basic writing structure that has really just a bunch of flowery parts in it. You know, Lovecraft isn't really the greatest writer ever, but he's very imaginative, and that's what makes him awesome. And Gordon takes that imagination and just develops it in a way for, you know, the screen that's just a lot of people are probably intimidated by trying to do that.
yeah, absolutely, man. So the occult angle of Dreams in the Witch House is, you know, boil it down as simply as possible. It comes down to sacred geometry, right? The concept that shapes and forms can direct or generate certain vibes or energies, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're aware of the fact that this is a very real concept.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right. So whereas, our in my some, almost 15 years of occult practice certainly has never brushed up in against anything non-Euclidean. um, in terms of sacred geometry, like any idea of sacred geometry I've ever come across in study or practice is definitely Euclidean. And now is a decent time to break down for listeners and maybe even yourself what is meant by the term non-Euclidean, because I didn't 100% get my head wrapped around this until a couple days ago. So Euclidean geometry is geometry created by Euclid, who we were talking about Pythagoras earlier. I don't know chronologically where those guys are related to each other, but they were both great Greek thinkers, I think. Don't quote me on that shit. So Euclid came up with the ideas of geometry that we are all taught and that we still use today, which all takes place on a 2D plane, right? Like all the geometric formulas that you were taught in high school takes place on a flat 2D plane.
Right.
And same for me, because that's Euclidean geometry. Non-Euclidean geometry is geometry that takes place on in a three-dimensional plane. So non-Euclidean geometry can account for 3D objects coming into contact with 2D objects, like a convex surface coming up against a flat plane, and so on and so forth. Things that you can't just draw on a piece of paper, things that you have to think about three-dimensionally. This is non-Euclidean geometry. Nowadays, we have a pile of theories and formula that account for parabolic surfaces meeting up with flat surfaces and all that kind of thing. There's a whole lot of non-Euclidean math you can actually study and become really good at. But in Lovecraft's day, it was a lot less so. And to him, in general, the concept was strange as shit and could be used to promote some even stranger ideas about dimensions and probabilities and that sort of thing. Which, like, figures, right? Our ideas of dimensions as taught to us by string theory nowadays are that, there could be multiple realities that are laid on top of each other. And that could account for some very strange angles, right? And all of that stuff could conceivably be covered by non-Euclidean geometry. So it makes sense that Lovecraft threw that term around to mean funky, fucking occult, weird shit.
Well, it's even like freaking me out to think about it, like thinking about these concepts. I'm like, I don't, that's like, it's like melting my brain almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough to get your head around those theories that build triangles and squares and circles on a piece of paper, which, like, to me and you seem difficult. To people with math minds, and people a lot smarter than us, it's probably no big deal, and they get their heads around that much easier. But I have a hard enough time with some of the higher forms of geometry, let alone getting into parabolic surfaces meeting flats. I don't even, that's fucking mental. I don't even want to try and think about that. But it makes sense that he used that in an alien, bizarre, threatening way. Because, like you said, we do seem to have like a primitive fear of forms, shapes, architecture, whatever, that doesn't conform to those like basic ideas of what we think of as stable and right in the world. And Lovecraft throws out those, Dreams in the Witch House is probably, he sat down, like, that concept fuels this whole story. Whereas the concept of non-Euclidean geometry and weird shit, it pops into Call of Cthulhu a little bit, but it's just kind of like flavoring. He talks about the weird angles on the sunken city, like swallowing people up in ways that don't make sense, and obtuse angles that act acute and shit like that. But it's Dreams in the Witch House that really sort of like boils it down to, if surfaces meet up in the right way, strange things can happen at that angle.
Yeah, he doesn't really explore the idea in terms of even Whispers in the Darkness. He doesn't really it's more, he talks about the traveling to other worlds, like, with your brain and the wavelengths and stuff, but he doesn't really explore like the angles and the mathematics like in terms of the occult, like actually
Right.
practicing it
Mm.
with mathematics as he does with the angles meeting and creating a portal to other worlds as he does with this story.
Right, yeah, and I think that's probably because I would guess that in general, Lovecraft probably had much less a fascination and knowledge of the occult than people nowadays seem to want to think. Like, I don't think that stuff fascinated him nearly as much as science. He was just big into science, and especially
Yeah.
fringe science of the day. And he would throw it into, because he wrote horror stories, he would tie that into witchcraft and stuff. But I don't see anything in his work that says to me that he was like really big into actually a cult per se. I think, like you said, he really liked to tie science concepts into what he was doing. But the whole deal with fringe math, like non-Euclidean geometry, is that it comes off a lot like magic. When you don't understand it, everything does. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, do you, in your own life, in your own personal experience, have you ever had any experiences relating to sacred geometry? You ever like looked at a mandala or a pentacle and had anything happen, or any? You got any tidbits, any anecdotes?
I have a very odd experience. Okay, I've had a lot of my early 20s until probably till probably about 26, until I stopped like experimenting with like psychedelics and drugs and all that, but not even just that. I've always been more into like I've had very strange dreams my whole life. So this is why this story hits very close to home, because it's about sleepwalking and dreaming. Um I had a very strange dream, and I slept in the attic of my uh, girlfriend's mom's house a lot. Like, I'm really good friends with her brother, so my brother-in-law now, really. But we spent a lot of time up in his attic, which is it looks like Gilman's room. Like I always said it's like Dreams in the Witch House up there. It's like Gilman's room. Um, and she's even had the weirdest dreams you've ever had there. I mean, she's had the scariest dreams. I can't even go into them, but there's like these weird doors that are shaped at different angles. It's like it's like little crawl spaces. And the attic is very a low ceiling, but it bends at it's not just like a right angle and then, goes at a 45-degree angle. It's like it goes up a weird 65, let's say 70-degree angle, then cuts at like a 35, and then it looks like I don't know, it looks just very weirdly built. But I had a dream once where I was kind of like, I guess, incorporeal at like I was like kind of like an out of body experience, maybe astral projection. I was like out of my body, like moving through the house in darkness, and I heard a loud shriek, and I jolted through from the attic down through the stairs through the front door, and there was just a black figure, like a blob amorphous, like almost like, but it had some kind of form, like, and then the door shuts behind me, and then I wake up. So I always been
Oh shit.
scared of that house. That's it. I guess if that's something with weird angles, then I guess that is an explanation. Maybe it's
Sure,
just,
man.
yeah.
No,
uh,
absolutely, yeah. And it reminds me of a thing that probably when I first hit record on this, I had it in mind, but I've spaced on it in between then and now. But now I got it again. I very briefly, for like a year and a half, lived in a tiny little house when we first moved to this town that I live in currently, and it was like it was all wood paneling on the inside, like dark wood paneling, and had small windows and few windows. It was just like a really dark house. And it always seemed really thick with shadows. And my bedroom was on the corner of the house, and it had, on all four sides of me, I either had windows or doors. And I had the strangest fucking dreams the whole time that we lived there. And I have journal notes from back in those days attributing to it. Like, I made a note in reference to dreams in the witch house and was like, there must be some strange angles in this place, and or there's something really kooky about sleeping in a room that has an opening on all sides of you. I don't know. So something like energetically about that place was really strange, and I had a whole lot of weird dreams the whole time we were there, and they went away as soon as we left there. So
Yeah, yeah, my dreams just stopped, it was, like, right before my first son was born, I haven't had dreams like that since I stayed there the last time. That was, like, one of the last times I stayed there. I haven't had a dream like that since,
huh.
so very weird.
Is it an old place?
Very old, and the stories that my girlfriend has, she grew up there. I mean, she said she had dreams of, like, 2 children, like, luring her down the stairs and, like, maybe, like, one that was, like, all the presidents of the United States walking down the stairs and, like, greeting her,
What?
and she says this stuff was, like, lucid, like, she was awake when this happened, but she's a very weird dreamer too, but, I mean, like I said, we have very active dream cycles. I mean, imaginations as well. So I mean, I guess why we're kind of a thing. That's one thing that we just click on is the horror stuff. So yeah,
Man, I don't. I so very rarely remember my dreams, which is mostly like in my experience, it's for the best. Like I only really remember my dreams if for some reason I have not smoked weed recently, which is like I smoke weed all day every day. I'm a
yeah,
full blown fucking pothead. But if you know shit comes up every now and then, you got a day, some shit's up, going down, you can't smoke, and you go to
yeah,
bed with like a 12-hour period where you haven't smoked, and I'll remember my dreams then, and they're never fucking good. They're always absolutely terrible, often like in really fucking bizarre, terrifying, Lovecraftian kind of ways, which is probably just because of my lifetime of I've warped my brain
yeah,
with this shit. You know, since I was a small lad, I have read nothing but really fucked up shit and watched nothing but really fucked up shit and done a lot of fucked up shit. So, you know, I've probably done this to myself and it's probably like nothing special, but
it comes with the territory, man.
right, I'm sure. But so, did you? Yeah, I think you mentioned this to me before. You don't smoke anymore, right?
I just started smoking CBD flower like recently. It doesn't
Oh
have
shit.
THC in it, but I mean, uh I used to love smoking. I mean, I used to do it every single day. I just stopped. I started getting really bad anxiety, and then yeah,
Yeah,
like I
that
literally
happens.
like
Yeah.
the last few weeks I started smoking CBD flower, which is just literally high cannabinoid. I just roll up a joint and smoke it. It's literally just like feeling stoned, but you just don't kind of get the psychedelic, psychoactive effect of it. But it definitely
Interesting.
works. Yeah, it's actually pretty awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you recall you know any changes in your dreams when you did quit smoking?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I was gonna say, if I would like before I didn't really used to drink a lot. I used to just only smoke pot. But when I would smoke and then not smoke as much, like the next night, my dreams would be stranger. Or like say I like smoked a lot that night, I would have crazy dreams. It definitely
Oh,
affected
okay.
my dreamscape a lot. Like I said, I've had nightmares since I can remember. I can remember one of my first nightmares, dude. I remember like seeing the poltergeist clown pull me under the bed just like in the movie. Like I mean,
Ooh, no, no.
yeah, I used to be terrified, but I mean, I was around horror movies growing up, so I was always scared of them.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I normally like anytime I bring this up with other smokers, especially people who have smoked for a long time and then quit or whatever. There always seems to be a correlate, like a shift in your dreams or possibly your remembrance, your memory of your dreams when either you're smoking or not. And it seems like you kind of have the opposite effect of me as me. Like I if I'm good and baked before bed, which is, you know, 99% of evenings, I will not remember my dreams at all. And if I do, it'll be like halfway through the day. The next day, I have some vague recollection of an image or something when something similar happens to me throughout my day. I'm like, oh, yeah, I had a dream about this or that or whatever. But I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah, yeah.
it's not like if I, for some reason, go to bed completely not stoned, I will have the most crazy, epic, fucked up nightmares.
Dude, I'll even have weird dreams if I like eat something I usually don't eat. Because most of the time I don't eat meat, but like sometimes I'll
Ah.
dabble and like just recently I mean I didn't eat meat for like 5 years or so, but I just recently started like just eating it on the weekends or something. I like eat like just a couple pieces of a steak or like half a steak or like something like that. I'll have weirder dreams when I have eat something strange out of my diet. You know what I mean? It affects
Huh.
me a lot. I don't know.
That's also interesting, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that's not unheard of. Obviously, that used to be a really common cliche, right? Anytime anything weird happened to somebody, you read like a sci-fi or a horror story from the 50s or the 60s, and when something
Yeah.
weird happens to somebody and they mention it to their friend, what does their friend say? Oh, you had a bad mushroom, you had a, you shouldn't have drank that beer or whatever. It's always like, oh, you had a weird sandwich or whatever,
Yeah, you shouldn't have
which
ate those
like
pork
nowadays
rinds
we're
or
like,
something. Yeah.
right, and that kind of has phased out of modern Western mentality. Like, we really don't say that to each other anymore because I feel like most of us have at least a passing familiarity with actual drugs and what they will do to you. And so the concept of like you ate a weird barbecue sandwich, and it made you see a UFO probably doesn't occur to most of us nowadays because you've probably smoked some weed or eaten some mushrooms or something, and you know you know what it's like to be like really fucking intoxicated or psychedelically affected. But that used to be, quite a common thing that people would say. And even though we don't really say it anymore, it still is true. Everything that we eat or drink affects us,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, I think anything you put in your body has some kind of uh it has some kind of effect. I mean, I just like I said, dude, like a lot of the reason I'm really like weird about my diet is because I think what you put into your body is definitely going to affect you in some way. Like if you eat shitty food all the time, dude, you're probably going to feel shitty, you know what I mean? Like certain, vitamins are in different, certain even hormone triggers are in different types of food. So I mean, that's what we are. We are just literally like chemical reactions in our brain, right? And so why wouldn't that have an effect?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, you know what? No, 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 no. Before we move off of geometry, here's the thing I wanted to talk to you about. Are you familiar with the phrase the stone tape theory?
No, no, I'm not.
Okay, so the stone tape theory is basically just that in the same way that a camera with light coming through a lens being projected onto a recordable medium can record images for posterity, it's certainly within reason in terms of physics that a house may accidentally perform the same function, right? A camera is a box with glass in it that allows light to pass through certain parts of it, right? And a house is a box with a lot of glass parts in it. So the stone tape theory goes that houses or various different structures could possibly record sound and image the same way that cameras do or that recorders do. And then a lot of what we see or hear, a lot of what we experience as possible hauntings are really just like replays.
I would believe this more than actual like apparitions for the most part. Because dude, I've been into supernatural stuff as long as I can remember. I used to go ghost hunting and stuff. Never have I once seen anything actually like I can really say that was truly like a spectral haunting. However, I've heard stories of people, and every time I say maybe it was some kind of like reflection, let's say. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was just like some
Uh
kind
huh.
of
Uh huh.
accidental image being projected. But this touches it on the nose, man. I didn't even know there was a term for the theory. I'm looking it up right now, and I'm like, damn, this is like pretty spot on for me.
Right on. Yeah, I think it's been around since the 70s. I think people have been saying that, but I'm not sure. I just heard it like a couple of years ago on a fairly cheesy paranormal podcast I listened to called Jim Harold's Campfire Stories. Um, it's only cheesy because Jim Harold is kind of cheesy and he does a lot of advertising, and I think he's like a fucking trumper or something. But otherwise, his story is just like normal folks calling him in like a radio show and telling their spooky tales, spooky real life tales. And a lot of times the stone tape theory gets brought up on Jim Harold. And I was like, that's a good way of it's a good phrase to use. And it's not a new idea to me because it's something like my dad has been saying to me since I was a little kid. You know, most of the reason that I'm fucked up and warped is because my dad is a weirdo, and he's always been into the idea of like, if we can record sound and image, surely that accidentally happens in nature from time to time, when, you know, when everything is just right, like the structure that we're talking about is just right, and the weather is just right. You know, these things might get recorded, and maybe when all those parameters are hit again, it replays, maybe. But I bring all this up because I would like to postulate to you the idea that perhaps, so let's take the stone tape theory a step further and say that if image and sound can be recorded onto a thing, could maybe consciousness be recorded onto a thing? Which is obviously something that like modern technology delves into a lot, right? Transhumanism is all about, let's try and figure out how to store our consciousness and pass it along in the future so that we can live forever. But it's vaguely fucking possible that through stone tape theory, Keziah Mason's consciousness, her soul, whatever represents us as people, the fucking electromagnetic pulse that powers this bag of bones and meat that we are, perhaps she was recorded into the strange angles of that house, and perhaps that's how she's pulling all this off. You know what I mean?
I think that's pretty. I mean, I never even thought about it that way. I've never even thought about it from that perspective. But maybe even it was her. She willfully sought out to do that so she could have kind of this immortality. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe she even happened upon that house and found that it had the proper angles to pull off such a thing.
Yeah.
Since she did have a wicked awesome black magic book about high math and total bonkers string theory shit, obviously, you know, she could have figured this out. But yeah, I just think that like if a house can double as a camera and a VCR, like a camera, a tape, and a VCR, couldn't a house possibly perform the same function as like a thumb drive or a hard drive? And, you know, in like our modern ideas of technology, could a person record themselves into a structure for safekeeping?
Maybe that was part of a ritual that she could perform. You know what I mean? Maybe that was part. Maybe it's in the book.
Exactly. There you go. And yeah, I wasn't like asking you like you know, like, well, what do you think? Explain that to me there, Edwin. But I mean, like, yeah, does any of that sound like it could fit within the scheme of this story? And I think you just answered that.
I
Yeah,
love that too. That's super cool.
maybe because of her book, she knew that she was looking for a place that had these angles that would, you know, in the book's terms, open a world to a new dimension, right? But what is magic? What is occultism in general? Magic and occultism is just tech and psychology that we do not understand.
Right.
Shit that is so far beyond us that it seems like it must come from some supernatural place. And so, yeah, like she had a book that was like, peel these babies open and pray to the black man, and he'll come and open a portal to a new dimension where you can hide and be free of the police, where you can keep slicing up babies forever. And yeah, sure, maybe that's like what the book said, more or less, but maybe the actual science behind it, the actual truth behind it, is that she just was able to record herself into this place with these strange angles that allowed for such a thing.
Hey, and think about it too, dude. That makes a really good point because Walter Gilman, she has to use him for her bidding. You know what I mean? Like she has to use a physical presence
Aha!
to move. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's because she's dead and gone, and the only thing that's in the house is what's recorded of her. Perhaps.
Right, and she was put to
Perhaps.
death, correct? Wait, was she put to death in the story, right? I can't
I
remember if she.
oof. I want to say part of me wants to say yes, But the other
Yeah,
part of me wants to
don't
say
quote
she
me
was
on that.
never caught.
Yeah.
Yeah, I.
However, though, she has to use a like a willing participant, or rather unconscious participant, to do her bidding, even through sleepwalking. You know what I mean? Through dreams, she can't travel really super by means of she can't get in a car and go kidnap a kid, obviously, right? So
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. It seems like she can't for sure. Yeah. And yeah. So what like if you think of a sleeping person as fuck. I'm like not a computer guys, but I'm trying to put this into computer terms. But so like if in theory, if when we sleep we are dormant machines, right? Like when we're awake, we're a fucking living meat robot and we've got ideas and we're doing things of our own accord and all of that. But say when we're asleep, we're in standby mode. Well, maybe another consciousness could fucking jack your meat robot, you know?
exactly.
And maybe that's all she's doing. So we could possibly boil all the non-Euclidean geometry black magic talk into some much more basic ideas about transference of consciousness.
It makes the story seem even more like probable in a scary sense. You know what I mean? Which makes it even more
Right.
horror. You know?
Exactly.
That's we just like
Yeah.
updated that story. You know what I'm saying? We just literally just modernized that story.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. And so, in occult terms, and chaos magic, if you're familiar with Peter Carroll or chaos magic at all, you might already be aware of this concept. But a big part of occultism, a really a solid idea that for me in my own life has certainly shown results, and I know people who've in their personal life utilized this technique to effect. But so in occultism, oftentimes you'll be uh, so if you want to find your way to a really grand insight, or if you want to really shake up your consciousness and yourself, if you really want to fucking institute a change within yourself, you can do something that is so far outside of your norm, is so far removed from something you would normally do, that is taboo. If you do something that edges into actual taboo territory, you can shake up yourself. You can like dig silt up from the bottom of your tank that you didn't know was there. You can uncover truths about yourself, angles of yourself that you didn't know anything about, if you will just step outside of your comfort zone and do something really fucking bizarre, something that will shake you up monumentally. And there's a lot of different ways you can achieve this, right? Like back in my Stranger Things episode, I talked about it a lot because Stranger Things is based on some shit that happened at Montauk, Long Island, where allegedly they were kidnapping homeless kids and putting them through such rigorous abuse that they tapped into out of body experiences, ESP, telekinesis. And in the show, you see that. You see Eleven getting pretty horrifically abused, like
Yeah.
her whole life in a lab. But allegedly what happened on Montauk, Long Island in real life was that there was a whole lot of sexual abuse being perpetrated on these children in these labs. Which the reason these fucking assholes were doing this is because there's a very real occult technique of shocking somebody's senses through sexual assault. I cannot, off the top of my head, remember the name of these Indian monks, but there's a sect of I think they're a sect of Hindi shamans in India and in parts of Pakistan. I think that these guys, like the initiation ritual into their group, is that once you reach a certain age, and I think it's 13 or maybe 14, you as a 13 or 14-year-old boy are taken to this ancient, creepy cemetery out in the middle of nowhere where the elder shamans of the group rape you.
What?
It sounds fucking totally bonkers. I know,
Yeah.
right? But they assault these boys, and when they come out the other side, they have insights on life that they would never have fucking reached otherwise. And again, I'm not like supporting these guys' decision to do this to each other. I will say that it's consensual. The people who join the ranks of this group, they know what they're getting into. They know what they're doing. It's not like they take these boys unawares, but they do that. They sexually assault these boys as a initiation into their group, and like when you're put through that kind of trauma, it is said that you will reach an out of body experience much easier. Easier is not really the word for it, but you know, it's one thing to sit on your floor and meditate yourself into a different consciousness. That takes discipline and practice and a whole lot of time. But if you are shaken up so extremely, like you would be if you were sexually assaulted, you might reach that place quick. You know, you bypass like all the personal work that you got to do to get to there.
Yeah, it's like utilizing trauma in a practice almost.
Right. Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is because perhaps Keziah Mason's black magic book of geometry that taught her how to record her consciousness into this old house for future storage. Maybe the reason that she has to kill babies or kill a baby or whatever she did, maybe it was just as simple as that. Maybe it was just that classic occult idea of breaking the taboo. Like she killed a baby because it was the most heinous, soul shaking shit she could do in her life, which is what forced her into the proper headspace to then record her headspace into a house forever. It's a theory.
I mean, dude, that is like, I don't think anybody's ever even broke down Dreams in the Witch House in this type of way. You know what I mean? Which it really does. Like, I mean, it's making a shit ton of sense. It's like giving Keziah this motive and, you know, in-depth structure to her practice, which we never, I mean, no one really ever thinks about. You know what I mean? It's giving her more development.
Right. Well, the thing about Lovecraftian antagonists and protagonists, Lovecraftian protagonists are often on the same path, right? They get a kooky old fucking book, they read and do a lot of shit that they know they shouldn't be fucking doing, and it leads them to a mind
Yeah.
unraveling realization, right? So like his good guys and his bad guys deal with that same kind of stuff. But what I've experienced in my life as an occult practitioner, the older I get, the more I look at Lovecraftian antagonists, people like Keziah Mason and people like the Waite family, you know, from the Dunwich Horror and stuff. And I identify with them so strongly, man. If you put a book in front of me and said that if you perform this ritual, you will bring into our world, you know, this thing from beyond time and space that will totally fuck shit up. Man, I'm going to tell you straight up, Edwin, I I think I would do it. You know, like that's just the kind of guy I have become.
You're looking for answers, dude, and this would solidify those answers that even Lovecraft says, man. What we fear is the unknown, and so these people want to know the unknown because then you're not afraid anymore. You know what I mean?
Right. And you know, in particular the people in his stories are so willing to reach that truth that they will do things like kill a baby, you know, and so on and so forth. For the record, not saying I kill a baby. What I'm saying is, I identify with these people who seem on surface level to be total monsters and just completely insane. Like I get the mentality behind digging into these ancient secrets to see if there's truth there, even in the face of danger. Even in the face of great cataclysmic danger, I still see that interest and I still see that drive as a person because I personally have that drive, you know. And I've done things in my personal life that I would never have done if we're not in the name of occultism, in the name of magic practice or ceremony. And I've got a lot out of those experiences in my life. And so again, not gonna stab a baby, but I get the motivation behind somebody being so hell bent on finding that truth, you know, that next level experience in life that maybe you would be pushed to that point. And yeah, we look at characters like Keziah Mason and you're like, oh, is she just a purely ancient evil old crone that just gets off on stabbing babies? But that's nobody. Nobody is that, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, what she really is somebody who wanted to get to that goal, even if she had to kill a baby.
Right, right. It eschews morality too. I mean, you look at the whole story, and you're like we said, we're breaking it down and giving her some depth to it. And you think about it, what foundation does morality really have besides what our culture tells us. Do you know what I'm saying?
None.
Um,
Yes, exactly.
like I said, both of us agree. Obviously, we're not going to kill a baby. You know what I mean? That's like
Nope.
we just know we're not supposed to do that. But at the same time, what about these other? There's other people out there that will push boundaries. Let's say not to kill a baby, but to do also more heinous acts, like say, I mean, assassinations, for example, assassinations for the greater
Right.
good to reach this kind of level of truth. You know what I mean? There's all these boundaries that people can be pushed as humans, and morality is always kind of a gray area, really.
Oh yeah, it's
So
a sliding scale for sure, man. And on the same note, we can apply that to Gilman. Gilman was so hell bent on finding some of the truth in his bonkers math that he was into that instead of, hard pressing this to authorities like he probably should have, he just kept pressing deeper and deeper into the dark until it was too late for him. I mean, there's a point, I think, where it is certainly in the film, there's a point where he stops pushing, where he's like, oh, I got to leave this alone. But it's way too late for him at that point. I mean, Keziah has already seen him and took note and put the mark on him, and you know, and all of that. It's too late for Gilman at that point. But the same
but he should have
drive,
left the house he should have left the house the day he knew some fucked up shit was going. He had a choice, you know what I mean? He had a choice to
exactly.
keep diving down, and his intrigue and curiosity is what drove him to make the poor decision, man.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely, sir. Yeah, which I think is brilliantly brought home by that scene where he wakes up in the vault room at the Miskatonic U library, and he's holding the Necronomicon.
Yes.
and
Yeah, and she's like,
and that
"Where'd
like
you get that book? Like, you shouldn't
yeah,
open that."
that yeah. Um yeah, all of that is like he had at that point been pressing for the truth so hard that even when he decided to back off, there was just the pedal was already to the floor. He was already downhill.
One of my favorite scenes in the film is when he's using his computer and he like figures out the equation, and it shows the way that space and time can bend through the use of these angles somehow, and it kind of
Yeah.
displays it on the computer
Mhm.
screen. That was like his picture perfect proof of his theory. Like, you know what you're getting into. You know this is a point of no return, and you did. It's not like he was showing scholars at Miskatonic University. He was
No,
looking
yeah.
into it for himself. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, which that's the sort of driving motivation for a lot of Lovecraft characters is that like I this scientific discovery can be mine if I just turn this corner with it. If I just figure it out, it can be mine. It can put me on the map, of academia. And I feel like that's what, at least the film version of Gilman, I feel like that's what he was going for. The story version
Yeah,
feels
for sure.
more like he feels less motivated in the story than he does in the film.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay, well, this seems like a weird order. Every time I do this, I'm like, I got to reorder these questions because this doesn't seem like the right order. But at this point, I'm going to ask you: did anything about Dreams in the Witch House not work for you?
Honestly, man, I'm trying to think of something that I really didn't like about it. I mean, no, man, I don't really have anything I can say that really doesn't that turns me off about this. I mean, like this is something that like me and my friends watch over and over. I mean, this is something that this is like kind of like a staple for our Lovecraft lore on our own. You know what I mean? So
Cool, man. Yeah, I think it works on so many levels because it brings across Lovecraftian horror and cosmic horror in a really nice, like subtle way. But then it's also working on a lot of super basic horror levels that are just grimy and are gonna get anybody. Like I don't give a shit who you are. Anytime I've ever introduced Dreams in the Witch House to somebody and it gets to the part where like Gilman is in his dreams and he's banging up that beautiful chick from next door or whatever, and then cut to that funky hag is on him, and she's all like,
oh
ah!
yeah,
it's that's so fucked up that gets anybody. That's like a very basic kind of horror movie thing. You know what I mean? It's like a jump scare almost.
yeah.
But this adaptation is full of things like that work for any old person, and it also works on a level for people who understand Lovecraftian horror. And that's rare to get both of those things in one. like I think Dagon is a tough sell for a lot of people because it's a big concept. You know, you're like, what fucking fish people living in a weird coastal town? Fuck, blow them up. You know, and it's like, nah, that's not. It's much bigger than that, man, and it's much worse than that. Like the real horror is finding out that your mom was from Fishtown and you're a fish man.
Yeah.
You know, like that's, and you're gonna go back to live with your immortal god in the sea because you have no choice. Like that's the horror. The horror is not Creature from the Black Lagoon times 1,000 in Spain. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, I got you. Long story, long way around saying that no, everything about this movie works for you. So now let's fucking bring it home, Edwin. And here on Ritual Light and Sound, we rate things on a skull rating that is 1 to 10 skulls. How many skulls do you give Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House?
I gotta give it 10 skulls. I mean, I give it
Right
10
on.
skulls, dude. I mean, straight up, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I got to agree with you, man. I got to agree with you. There's some like little, it's just I guess tiny little shit that I won't even bring up because it's petty and I shouldn't even focus on it. But like tiny technical stuff that I might can nitpick at. But does it stop it from being a phenomenal adaptation of a Lovecraft story and being scary as shit and really new, unique and well done? No, it doesn't hold any of that back. And because of that, and because this is the first Lovecraft adaptation, and one of the best ones, honestly, to me, like Dreams in the Witch House, Dagon, and The Call of Cthulhu, like I said, are some of the best. And for getting it so very spot on, I will join you in giving it 10 skulls. So 2 ratings of 10 skulls for Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House from me and Edwin Callahan of Gravely Unusual Magazine. So, here we are. We have reached the end of our journey, sir. I would like to offer you this time to plug yourself sounds pretty gross. So I'm not going
I
to
will shamelessly
promote your stuff, man. Promote your stuff. Tell the people where they can find you and find your stuff.
Yeah, you guys can find us at gravelyunusual.bigcartel.com. That's where you're gonna order any products that we have. It sounds like makeup. It's not fucking makeup. It is a illustrated magazine. We got comics from creators that aren't, in the mainstream. Some of them work for it. This is kind of a niche for them to get their stories out that nobody else will publish. We publish the stuff that is unpublishable. Same with fiction writers. We have, unique, bizarro fiction, just transcends from, weird tales to fucking splatterpunk, there's no fucking censorship in this. It's just literally like as raw as you can get. It has interviews. We interviewed Joe Bob Briggs in our second issue. Bruce Campbell was in our third issue. We got merch. We got, you know, so we have some other zines on our website too. And I'm always on the social media just talking shit. So you can find us at Gravely Unusual on Instagram, at Gravely Unusual on Twitter. We have Facebook too at Gravely Unusual. So yeah, check out anything we're doing. We also have a podcast, Gravely Unusual Lives. It's on Spotify and all that. That's where I kind of which Evan's been on before too. So we just kind of just bullshit about horror and other cool things. So yeah, definitely check us out and support the underground, man.
Absolutely. The underground is the only ground that there is for real art. If I may, let me throw this out there, man. Listeners, if you are familiar with both Heavy Metal AD, the old school black and white magazine / comic from the UK that ran Judge Dredd and stuff like that, if you're familiar with Heavy Metal AD and old school horror mags like Creepy and Eerie, which were those plus sized comic book kind of things, Gravely Unusual is like a mix between Creepy and Eerie and Heavy Metal AD, but also like a underground black metal, death metal zine. You get, like Edwin said, you get comic books, you get horror fiction, and then you get cool info about black metal and death metal, grindcore, all kinds of underground metal and awesome music. Really unique magazine, and to me, humble opinion, coolest thing printed on paper nowadays.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Oh, you're so very welcome, man. I'm very disappointed in the current state of like horror publications. It's a sad state of affairs out there. But if you're into that kind of stuff, if you're into like old school, grimy, horror mag stuff, underground comics, black metal, Gravely Unusual is for you. And if you're listening to Ritual Light and Sound because you're into Lurking Transmission, obviously you're a fucking weird black metal creep and you 100% need to be owning and reading Gravely Unusual magazine. Again, check out Gravely Unusual at Big Cartel, right? Gravely Unusual at bigcartel.com.
Gravelyunusual.bigcartel.com.
Okay, I'm terrible with the internet. But yeah, listen to everything that Edwin said and check out Gravely Unusual. They are cool as shit.
Do you dare see what strange horrors are lurking just beneath the surface of your safe home environments? Everything you know and believe will be compromised with just a glance into the serpentine labyrinth of darkness that slithers between the ever-loosening stitches that bind the fabric of our reality. Your friends, your family, your very concept of life and perception of being will be challenged when you pull back the thin veil we call existence, which covers the abyss that threatens to swallow us whole upon a single moment's notice. So strap in and get ready to have your entire worldview warped by Super Deluxe Existential Fighter, now available on the Nintendo Virtual Boy console. You'll never be the same again.
There are two big occult concepts represented in Dreams in the Witch House, that of both dreams and sacred geometry. But to cover both would be a mighty long episode, and since there are other films I can use to dive into dreams, the angle I chose to focus on for this episode is the concept of sacred geometry. The idea that lines and shapes and the angles at which they meet might be able to shape and direct energy, maybe even matter. So how accurate is Lovecraft and Gordon's representation of sacred geometry? Well, as Edwin and I discussed, if we look at the stone tape theory through the lens of sacred geometry, I think we have a decent framework for understanding how the actions of the witch Keziah Mason could be possible. If a house can be both a camera and a playback machine, it can perhaps be a hard drive. And if a house can be a hard drive, perhaps a practitioner could store their self onto this hard drive. And through a combination of will, geometry, environmental conditions, and magical techniques, they could perpetrate their work upon those who stray into their house. Perhaps. I lack the proper understanding and math vocabulary to really talk about non-Euclidean geometry with you listeners, but suffice to say that non-Euclidean geometry refers to parabolic surfaces meeting with two-dimensional surfaces, rather than simply dealing with two-dimensional surfaces and angles, such as in normal Euclidean geometry. A parabolic surface, in case you don't know, is a convex surface like a contact lens, or a camera lens. Which brings me to this. By definition, listeners, a camera is a non-Euclidean structure. All this aside, how much sacred geometry do we really see represented in the film? Well, that depends on how you look at things, but here's a rundown by my observation. We first see the witch house itself, whole and real and right on screen. And the house chosen does indeed have a vibe. We see the dreaded corner in Gilman's room, the confluence of strange angles, the non-Euclidean building code nightmare that the witch Keziah Mason is able to utilize for her dark rituals and circumnavigation of time itself. We are presented with an occurrence that doesn't follow the typical trajectory of time as we know it. A perhaps non-Euclidean story, in that poor young Walter Gilman's life was not a line, but rather a crooked spiral that orbited the witch house and lured him into his doom, or his fate, however you choose to look at it. It has many angles, this story. I rate things on a hand of glory scale when it comes to occult authenticity here on Ritual Light and Sound, and I give Stuart Gordon's Dreams in the Witch House a 9 out of 10. 9 hands of glory for Dreams in the Witch House. Now it's time for some gematriography. Time for some more gematriography, y'all. In case this is your first episode of Ritual Light and Sound, this is where I practice the Kabbalist art of gematria on the title of a film. Gematria is the practice of getting a numerical value for a word in Old Hebrew, then looking for words and phrases associated with that number. Dreams in the Witch House added up to the number 943. And the first thing I found when referencing the number 943 was the phrase, the number of servitors of Asmodee the demon. I've never seen Asmodeus spelled that way, as Asmodee, and the first E has an accent mark over it. So I whipped out my handy Dictionary of Demons, my Michel Balanche, and I looked this up. Turns out that Asmodee, with the accent mark over the first of the two E's at the end, is from the Mather's translation of the Abramelin text, and according to this translation, Asmodee can know the secrets of any person, can transmute metals, and can transmogrify people and animals. It appears in the Goetia as Asmodee, Asmoday. Interesting, given the strange alloys in the short story version of Dreams in the Witch House, and given Brown Jenkin, the witch's rat familiar with the human face. After the Asmodee thing, here are some interesting phrases that I found also associated with the number 943. He seized, elevated, she, changeless, constant, the appointed time, to seize suddenly, a brick, a tile, a building, an architect, meditation, imagination, sin, a hut, to ransom, avenge, a wall, to force to do wrong to shut up or obstruct, to measure out. Damn. Those are all pretty much the high points of this story, y'all. And that's a wrap for the Dreams in the Witch House edition of Gematriography. Let's outro this mother and get out of this smoky room. In closing, Dreams in the Witch House is a great movie. My second favorite Stuart Gordon film behind Dagon. In the way that it's shot and edited, it does a great job of using space to convey story, and strangeness, and horror. It works on a loss of agency and circular logic that leads to a terrible, unavoidable fate for the protagonist. It feels like a tiny, winding maze that folds in on its own dusty corners until there is nowhere left to go but beyond the realm of sanity. I give it 10 skulls. For achieving what I feel is an easily accessible depiction of the possible horrors of non-Euclidean geometry and the black arts, I give it 9 hands of glory. Dreams in the Witch House is an infanticidal architectural nightmare, with a creepy-ass rat with a human face. Next up on Ritual Light and Sound, Synecdoche, New York. That's right, Charlie Kaufman's directorial debut. A bonkers movie about the power of the mind, the power of curated space, or ritual space, if you will, and about creators and creations. An environment so meticulously crafted and so thoroughly and wholeheartedly engaged with that it becomes reality. Catch you then. Thanks for listening to Ritual Light and Sound. I've been your host, Evan Dean Shelton. Check out the Lurking Transmission Presents Patreon page to find out how you can get access to every single episode of Ritual Light and Sound and not just the odd-numbered, publicly available ones. Episode 4 is about Hellraiser and out-of-body experiences, and it is a leather-bound, bare-assed doozy. Join the Lurking Transmission Presents Patreon to hear it, and other exclusive cool stuff. Until next time, remember, film is ceremonial magic, performed for you at roughly 24 sigils per second. How is it affecting you?
I think that all vital periods of the drama and of literature are periods of great violence, and that all of our great plays and novels are violent. And I don't like them when they are poor novels, or when they are not works of art. They become shoddy and seem to be pandering.
Yes, but usually
something wicked, you know.
Virtue triumphs, whereas in the horror comics it doesn't.
How doesn't it?
I don't think so.
No.
Well, it doesn't in Edgar Allan Poe either, you know.
Eraserhead, David Lynch, and Fred Elms, who is the lighting cameraman in the same picture. And where are we right now?
We're down in the tanks right now.
The tanks.
Yeah.
It's one of the locations.
Yeah, we shot an early scene of Henry just walking through here. We had a longer scene rigged up, and if you look down here, you can see what remains of a cat we had down here.
Was this here when you got here?
No, I brought this down here. Oh. This I got from a veterinarian. It was just died, and And so he let me, work with it. And it wasn't like this, but when we were working with it, it went into the water there, and there's a lot of tar in there, and it got covered with tar and preserved itself. That was 5 years ago that was there.
But that never got into the film.
No, that cat's not in the film. But Henry walks right from over there through here and comes right to here. So in a sense, it's right just below the shot that's in the film is this cat.